Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the newest episode of the In Production podcast. Today, we have a new amazing guest, Conrad. Please tell us more about yourself and why should people listen?
Yeah, hello all. I'm Conrad Bedard. I've been in the procurement industry now for roughly 16 years. Also an entrepreneur who owns multiple hospitality businesses. So really looking forward to discussing with you guys and Nick today on, procurement from both the buy side as well as the sell side, and also the impacts of AI in the industry and how I've been personally impacted with AI in the corporate world.
Well, this is great to hear. And I think the first question that I wanted to ask you when I was preparing, your experience and background is very rich. You have been rebuilding procurement function from scratch at 5 different companies in banking, insurance, and telecom. So if you guys are viewing and you're from one of these industries, this episode is really for you. And every single time, Conrad, you walked into a place that was treating procurement like a cost center. Yeah, like money goes in, money goes out. Like, do we have a profit or not? So what is the thing those organizations all had in common that made them understanding the function in the first place?
Yeah, I would say surprisingly, I would say the majority of the organizations I've worked with, the organization actually didn't understand the function or understand the department and what it was there and the value it brought. So I would say in the first 90 days, the biggest thing I really, observe and analyze with an organization is the maturity and the understanding, the education of the understanding of procurement, sourcing, vendor management, the full life cycle of the procurement life cycle. And then just observing how interactions within, stakeholders, vendors, and the department are, as well as looking at the processes that are currently in place and the policies that are currently in place. I would say majority of the organizations will have a basic foundation. And usually where I see the sticky point with most organizations is really when it comes to, procurement and supporting the business, and the business understanding that procurement's not strictly just a cost savings driver or a contract administration function, but really trying to provide total value to the business from either, revenue generation, increase in business innovation to innovate on new products and services. I think the days of cost savings and procurement have died over 10 years ago when procurement first was kind of getting into, the weeds of things. But now it's really, how does procurement help the bottom line and increase revenue and bring in revenue?
100%. And innovation, like I think what you mentioned is very important because the procurement, I think they have a very holistic view, let's call it for the whole company, and they can better feel where the organization should move. What is like, because you can innovate in every department, but I think you need people that have the view of the weakest spot, and fixing that weakest spot with the innovation will actually help the whole company move forward. And I think that you definitely need people, and those people are in procurement who can do that. But at the same time, most of people that I know that are in procurement, they're leading procurement transformation. They didn't initially start out planning a procurement career. When I was looking back at your early years at TD, what was the moment that you understood and you realized, well, actually, I'm really good at procurement. I'm actually really good. I want to deepen my career in this field. What made you decide that?
Yeah, my procurement story is actually pretty funny. I fell into procurement by accident, I would say. So I graduated, university with a bachelor's of business degree with expertise and a major in marketing and a minor in human resources. I really wanted to get into the marketing world and, work on things like campaigns and branding and things like that. Started at TD, level up at the call center, doing credit card activations and then moving on to credit and things like that. And then eventually I saw a role in procurement, a procurement analyst role, supporting the marketing department. So I took that as an opportunity of getting a foot in the door with the marketing department and getting involved with the marketing department. Obviously understanding a little bit about procurement, but never actually, full out doing procurement ever in my life, other than personal purchases and personal relationships with vendors. So yeah, I got into it. And then I would say after a year of doing that, I got hooked. I just enjoyed, I think procurement is a unique function where it is involved in everything an organization does, from strategy to day-to-day operations. And the knowledge and conversations you get into in procurement are not typical conversations that any roles within organizations get into. So
Mm-hmm.
that strategic being part of conversations, understanding things that are coming up or acquisitions or mergers that are happening and being part of those and really seeing the fruit of your work come to fruition
Mm-hmm.
is what really excited me. And then obviously the negotiation piece and the vendor relationship piece was a pleasure. Just through those, multiple projects in the 16 plus years I've been doing procurement, I've met a lot of people, have great friendships with a lot of people on the vendor side as well as the stakeholder side.
Mm-hmm.
Even to this day, I still talk to initial account reps back in my very first TD deal. I had a print house here in London. So, and I'm actually using them for my own personal business now. So it's just a full circle effect and just, get to meet new people and get to do something different every day. It's not doing the same task and the same thing every day and really being part of those strategic conversations. So I remember the very first campaign I was involved was back when TD was giving away free tablets when you
Mm-hmm.
opened out an account. So I was the back end on negotiating to get, those Samsung tablets, working with Samsung,
Mm-hmm.
working with
Mm-hmm.
the delivery logistics company to fulfill those orders. So it was very exciting knowing that that was coming 6 months before anybody else in the organization knew that that campaign was happening. So
That sounds very interesting and very rewarding,
yes,
like sales, but from the other side of the sales.
exactly. And kind of got the best of both worlds, right? Because
Yeah.
on the procurement, majority of my career has been supporting the marketing and HR department. So I was involved in working with the agencies, negotiating with the agencies, and even being part of some of the campaigns from a vendor management of managing those agencies. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, I wasn't directly part of the marketing team, but I was pretty much I would say a dotted line to the marketing department and involved with the marketing team just as much on the day to day than being part of the marketing. So to me, it was kind of having the best of both worlds of not being part of the marketing, but supporting marketing and still being able to be participating in a lot of the strategic conversations and day-to-day activities.
It's very interesting. What does it look like when you enter a new organization? Like, what do you have to do in the first 90 days to feel comfortable with rebuilding procurement, with getting your vision implemented? So, like, what are you actually doing in the beginning to assess the lay of the land?
Yeah, I would say building relationships is number one. Meeting people, understanding how things are currently running, what are some of their pain points, where things are going well. Coming in as well with your expertise, letting them know that, you're not someone who doesn't understand completely their portfolio or anything like that. So being prepared with some initial analysis and having some initial high level conversations of opportunities. And then from there, I would say the proof is in the pudding, right? So actually putting, your analysis to work and showing action and providing action reach. Obviously, you start small with small little engagements and, proving yourself and gain the trust of those stakeholders and building those relationships. And eventually
Mm-hmm.
it becomes like second nature that, these stakeholders are reaching out to you, unintentionally, but they're just so used to working with you and they see the value of you that they purposely bring you into those conversations without having to force it. So,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, to this day, I still talk to stakeholders in pretty much every organization I've worked with, and we still bounce ideas. I have some friends at Lululemon, I have some friends at Rogers who are giving me calls, being like, "Hey, Conrad, we're working on this engagement here, and I know you and me worked on something similar back in our past lives. Just wondering what some advice you would give me that I could bring back to my procurement team and bring some value to the conversation to expedite some things." So yeah, like I said, it's really proving yourself and building those relationships. If you don't build those relationships and prove yourself, then there's going to be a lot of friction in the
Yeah.
conversations and a lot of friction. So, I'm of the mentality that I don't like to police procurement in an organization. I want people to see the
To
value of
yeah,
the
yeah.
process and of the philosophy versus pushing the mentality.
Well, I can definitely say it's a rare stance when you can do it. But if you can pull this off, this is amazing. This is the person that you always want to have in your team, in your company. At the same time, like I saw that you led multiple source to pay technology implementations.
Yes.
A lot of organizations that I know, they buy the platform and then they struggle to get the value from what they were initially promised. And there is a limit to what you can assess in the beginning of the relationship. What usually goes wrong once the implementation starts happening? Why that's happening?
Yeah, I would say the number one issue I hear of and see is that people buy technology, but then implement to current processes.
Mm,
Obviously, these technologies are built for the future of procurement and the new trends and new processes of procurement, but people struggle with change, right? People are comfortable following a same process, following the same steps. So what usually happens is they replicate their current state with technology and think that everything's going to be fixed. The approach that
mm-hmm,
we took in my last few organizations was we're going to completely remodel how we do procurement. Policies stay the same with tweaks here and there because obviously there's automations and we could, put a little bit more control, more flexibility, and more self-serve to our stakeholders and clients. But it's really looking at the tool and rebuilding your processes to work with the tool out of the box as much as possible.
mm-hmm,
Obviously, if I've come to a few heavily regulated industries where we've had to make some customizations and configurations to make it work from a regulatory perspective. But it's, I would say the key thing is not implementing a technology based on old practices that are already broken and thinking they're going to be fixed.
mm-hmm,
I would say the other thing is data. Data is key. If you don't have clean data, you don't have clear SOPs and processes, it's very hard to, transition to a new tool and get, the value of, a lot of the analytics, again, the AI functionality when
mm-hmm,
you don't have clean data. So, dirty data in is dirty data out. So that data migration piece is very key. And I see a lot of people basically have the data kind of migration piece as as an afterthought of an implementation
mm-hmm,
versus kind of the priority of an implementation. So you're not going to get all these insights from the spend analytics tool and from the vendor management tool and the risk module if you don't have the proper data in there to be able to provide those analytics. So
mm-hmm.
it's very key to make sure that you prioritize that data cleansing and data migration, and also not just lift and shift current broken processes into a tool and think that it's going to be fixed.
Yeah, but it sounds like a very challenging kind of advice because at the same time you can never know to the full state what people are actually doing because SOP can be one. Let's
Correct.
take a bank use case, loan origination. The SOP and regulation for loan origination is one thing, but the way that people are actually doing it, that have been doing it for the last 10 years, can be very different. And it's a very challenging thing to then go and implement any kind of solution for them because exactly like if you with the new tool you need to redefine the process, like for example right now with AI it doesn't make sense, like maybe in the beginning it does make sense to just take AI to automate what you guys are already doing, but in long term AI can do way more things, making 20-step processes like 5-step processes because it already can compile all the information. So I'm like curious, how do you deal with the situation where everybody in the organization, it's not just departments that are doing operations, like also in the procurement one, some parts of the decision are informal that you just discuss, something is in one spreadsheet, something is another spreadsheet. The information is usually across like 5 different systems. How do you what do you do with this gap with in order to do something, in order to implement a successful transformation, you need all this data, but you don't really have this data because it's like all over the place.
Correct. Yeah, I would say change management is another key thing and involving key stakeholders. To your point, Nick, source to pay technology is not only being used by the procurement team, it's used by IT, the business function, legal function, AP, and other folks within the organizations like risk and things like that. So, the sad truth is in pretty much all of my source to pay transformations and initiatives, it took almost 2 years to get approval to get those business cases approved,
Mm,
but that's because we purposely reached out to all the different stakeholders and got their feedback and educated them on what the tool can do. That's another thing. Like source to pay technology has been out forever. Like, I remember, back in 2010, TD implemented, back in the day, IBM and Taurus and Coupa when
mm-hmm,
Coupa only had P2P module and they were using MTaurus and acquired them later on. Like I said, it's been over 10 years now that source to pay technology is being out. It's surprisingly surprising how many people still don't know and understand source to pay technology and procurement technology. So yeah, education, buy-in is key.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And just, that value proposition, the what's in it for me and why should we do this is really important to have a clear statement on those, the how, what, and why when it comes to each one of those different kind of audience groups.
Hmm.
And to your point, through those conversations is when you start learning about, I laugh because the last one we did, we had three different databases for risk. We had the business had their own risk database. We had the risk team who had their risk database, and then we had the procurement team who had our own risk database as well. So
Hmm.
through those conversations, you learn about these new data sets that you may have never known about or didn't even know existed. And that's when you start working on, again, going back to that data migration, data cleansing conversation is where can we consolidate, where can we cleanse, and, what can we move forward or what doesn't need to be moved forward or what's duplication.
100%. And it's like, you never know. Yes, you never know what's gonna move the needle, but 100% the employee, the operator, they need to see in that point B that you are drawing for them, they should see that that's their point B as well. Because if they don't feel aligned with the point B that the whole organization or you as the procurement team are building, they're not gonna do it in the best case. In the worst case, they're gonna sabotage it and they're gonna do everything in control. So yeah.
Correct.
Same thing with AI right now. AI platforms, AI solutions, decisions, automations, I don't know, consultants, any kind of solution with AI is being
Yeah.
sold into procurement right now. And there is a lot of ways, like even for procurement itself, like AI to automate sourcing decisions, AI to review the contracts, AI to assess the supplier risk, and all sorts of different AIs. For a procurement leader that is sitting inside like a regulated financial institution, what is like the honest question they should be asking before they buy any of AI tooling for themselves or for departments that they want to improve AI into?
Yeah, so I've had a few interesting conversations around AI, and I go back to when manufacturing started bringing robotics into manufacturing,
Uh-huh.
right? Everyone bought these shiny robots to take over people's roles or, minimize human hours on the production line. What they forgot was, you have to acquire the equipment first of all, then you have
Uh-huh.
to knowledge transfer and adjust the equipment before it could get to production. So actually, I have a friend who works at a production factory for a large brewery and distiller, and they just brought in a bunch of robotics, and they've committed to these volume commitments, not taking into consideration that it's going to take roughly 18 months to get this new robotics equipment at the capacity, at the proper
Mm-hmm.
capacity levels it's supposed to be producing. So I see the same thing with AI right now. The big crave right now is obviously AI. You see a lot of organizations, making employee cuts due to AI. I think the biggest error people are doing is they're making these adjustments before A, acquiring the AI, B,
Mm-hmm.
knowledge transferring
Mm-hmm.
in order for the AI to work properly and train the AI, and then making sure it's stabilized so that the AI can actually, optimize processes or automate processes. To me, again, AI is getting obviously better every day. I still think it's a tool. It needs to be used as a tool. You
Mm-hmm.
still need to put the human aspect, even when AI is, performing a task or a process or a decision for you. I've seen a lot of folks, and my wife's a teacher as well. We see a lot of people relying on AI and just, putting initial AI prompts and using it word for word based
Mm-hmm.
on the AI spitting it out and not validating or, referring back. To me, AI is a good starting point. It's great for, you know, administration, easy, low risk tasks. But when you start getting into decision making and things like that, you still need to put a governance in place to validate that the AI
Yeah, yeah.
is reviewing and providing recommendations that are appropriate for the organization, and also making sure that, specifically in a heavily regulated industry, that it's defendable and defensible. So, most AI tools I see in the procurement world today, when it comes to analyzing responses and things like that, still heavily focused strictly on the commercial aspect of the response versus the holistic,
Mm-hmm.
qualitative, quantitative response, right? So I still think there's some room for improvement. But again, I think the number one thing people need to realize is AI is a tool. It still needs to be validated. It's not at a point where you can 100% let it go on its own and complete tasks. You still need to do your QA. You still need to do the odd, spot tests to make sure that it's, functioning the way you want it to function.
So is this what you just said? Is this like the core thing that you as the procurement leader is looking for when you're making decisions? Like maybe you can teach me and the audience here, because you sat on both sides of the table, on the buying side
Sure.
and on the governance side. What does it take for a procurement leader to say yes? Or maybe what are the most common reasons why procurement leaders are saying no right now to AI or to anything than anything else?
Yeah, I would say AI is new. So obviously the legal risk and just operational risk is new, right? And not fully understood at this point, right? So it's understanding what you're using AI for. So a clear requirements of what AI will be doing
Mm-hmm.
and trying to obviously mitigate the risk as much as possible. I would say in most cases, it's never going to be procurement who stops the AI conversation of bringing in AI. It's probably most likely going to be a risk or IT stakeholder who's going to stop it based on, their policies or maturity or the risk appetite of those organizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know a lot of organizations right now are still figuring out their AI policies and their AI frameworks and things like that. So we're in a little bit of a scary place where people are bringing in AI, but organizations still haven't even figured out what their appetite is for AI from a risk framework and policies perspective. And I think as well too, going back to the source to pay side of things, AI is 100% dependent on data and insights.
Mm-hmm.
So again, without the proper knowledge, without the proper data, you're not going to get the value of AI that you think you're going to get if it's not trained or it doesn't have the proper historical data to be able to make those proper decisions. And another thing, a lot of organizations, even heavily regulated, are going from maturity level 2 to 3 and trying to jump into this net new innovative thing of AI that's at a level 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider like you have your iPhone, you're trying to jump 3 4 major releases versus going to the next release. So sometimes people try to stretch too far too fast without fixing the gaps in between to be able to get there. So things like, enterprise data strategies, data lakes and things like that to be able to really congest clean data to be
Mm-hmm.
able to get the maximum value of that AI.
What about the narrative right now that AI is gonna replace junior level folks, mid level folks in procurement, in software development, in sales, in marketing, like anywhere, depending on how easy it is to work in the environment where the person is working? For coding, like even the major AI labs are telling that by the end of the year, most coding jobs can be done by AI. Do you believe those narratives that AI is going to be automating and replacing most of the junior and mid-level jobs in procurement specifically and all over the organization? What's your view on this story?
I would say not necessarily replace completely their roles, but maybe removing some of those tasks off of their plate.
Mm,
And I think that's where organizations need to start shifting the focus is reevaluating what those roles are now, right? Obviously, AI will be able to take over some of the task or a good portion of the tasks. So now it's reframing those roles and those teams and with the knowledge of AI is able and capable to take on these this capacity away from the team, right? So
mhm,
it's almost like like I said, as I mentioned earlier, you're still gonna have to, quality control, do reviews to make sure that's accurate. I'm still not in a position where I would be 100% confident of just grabbing whatever AI sent me without reviewing it and presenting it to, executive or board level.
mhm,
So we're still, to me, it's going to be not necessarily replacing them, but I think it's going to be evolving those roles into different roles and different tasks. Unfortunately, that's not the path most organizations are taking. The path of most organizations is eliminating versus evolving. So I think we're going to see probably an evolution in the next kind of 5 years of, where AI is taking up a lot of capacity and people now evolving some of those roles to different roles and different tasks that kind of involve the AI piece.
mhm. Yeah, like what you described is like what's happening right now, which is not a good way to tackle the problem. The ideal way how the problem should be happened. In my practice, the way to solve this problem, kind of like in the middle, is when you still implement AI, you stop hiring as much as you were supposed to hire or as you were planning to hire, because, like, for example, right now we don't need a sales development representative, because me with AI, we can generate same level of interest that a sales development representative would generate. But at the same time, the job is not created. We're not firing anyone, so
Yeah.
everybody's taking the same place. And as the final piece of advice for the episode and for the audience, what would you say for a procurement leader who sits in a mid-sized financial institution and they're being asked every day by the CFO, by the management, hey, let's do more with less, let's try to implement AI, let's be smart about how we make decisions, let's reevaluate how we're moving here. What is the most practical place to start? What would you say to those kind of people?
Yeah, I would say start at the process, start at the administrative pieces that take a lot of time and effort. That shouldn't things like swivel chair data entry,
Mm-hmm.
forms, intakes, and things like that. Start small, and once you get the small stuff done, then start going larger and more complex. I think once you start at small, low risk, low complexity tasks, you start learning a little bit the nuances of the AI and what it can do and what it cannot do. And as you get more and more complex, you have that kind of knowledge to go back on the lower complexity areas. But I would say the biggest things I know we started right off the get-go were things like, not from a legal perspective, non-disclosure agreements. From a procurement perspective, initial RFP drafting of, RFPs, qualitative and quantitative data. Research is another big one that, I think AI is doing great and is gathering a lot of things, and also is, eliminating third-party costs. I know the market research folks won't like this, but we were able to leverage AI to do a lot of research that got us some very rich information to help us with benchmarking
Mm-hmm.
and pre-understanding before we even went out to market what to expect to come out of some of the results. So I was trying those areas of like intake, initial data entry, basic analysis, and basic reviews to start off, and then move on to the more complex things like evaluations and risk monitoring and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's kind of where I would say to start off today. I'm of the mindset of evolving, and by doing this, you're able to run more sourcing events, run more category strategies, have more conversations and build more relationships with your stakeholders, get more involved in the businesses and the P&L, and find more ways to innovate, work with vendors to innovate. So to me, that's really, I think, the power of AI that I don't think people are fully leveraging. They're leveraging the FTE costs versus evolving the role and leveraging that additional capacity to bring in more
Mm-hmm.
innovation, more revenue, and bettering the organization overall.
I have nothing to add here except of
Mm.
amen. Thank you so much for your time and insights, Conrad. If anybody from the audience wants to get in touch with you, what's going to be the way to reach you?
Yeah, I would say feel free to reach out to me via email or LinkedIn. I don't know, Nick, if you want, share it on the post,
Yeah,
but
I can share it in the show notes. Yeah.
yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or via email, and from there, we can always connect over the phone.
Well, thanks you so much again, and I wish you all the best. Let's do the second episode sooner or later.
Thank you, Nick.